So in this part, we will be seeing conditional statements and loops in JavaScript. So conditional statements. So what are meant by conditional statements? So conditional statements enable us to perform actions based on some condition. So basically there are if else, right? So if else, else if ladder, switch case and all those stuff. Now we will be seeing if else. So now let's write a basic program to check whether a number is even or odd. So let's create a variable a equals 10. What I will do is uh, now let a equals 10. Now to as in the previous languages, if a division modulo 2 equals 0. So please keep in mind in JavaScript we use 3 equals for comparison. Like you can also use double equals, but 3 equals is recommended. So 3 equals. Now what you need to do is if a ampersand 2 equals 0, let's print it as oops even. So else will be odd. That's it. So just this is how we use conditional statements inside in JavaScript. You can also use it as an else if ladder. Else if else console.log error. So whether if the a is something like an a string, it won't be right. So just so this is else if ladder. So these are conditional statements in JavaScript. Now what we will do is we will see loops in JavaScript. So there are majorly two loops. One is for and second one is for each. And there is also something called as map. We will be looking into this. Now let's start the tutorial. So the first one is for loop. So for loop. So for loop is used when we know the starting condition as well as termination condition. When we know both of these, we can go with for loop. Take an example. We need to print the values from 1 to 10. As we know both starting condition as well as termination condition. To do this thing simply for let I equals 0, I less than 10, I plus plus console.log I. That's it. Now let's see the output. So as you can see, it has printed from 0 to 9. If we need to print it from 1 to 10, less than or equals to 10. So that's it. 1 to 10. So this is how we use for loop in JavaScript. Now what we will do is we will look into the next loop called as for each. So for each loop is used on arrays and objects. So basically for each loop is used when we don't know the termination condition. This is mainly applied on arrays, right? So let's see an example. Uh, let's assume I had an array 1, 2, 3, 4. What I need to do is print all these elements. Okay, now I can do it this way. Let I equals to 0, I less than 4 elements, I plus plus, right? And simply console.log a of I, right? This is how we will do it in normal way. So that compiler has been loaded. Yep, there you go. So as the output will be 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is one way of doing things. But as this is an array, sometimes we don't know the exact size of array, right? A4. So in that case, we can use something called as for each loop. So to do that, uh, to use for each loop, we array name for each. What it will do is it will it will get a value. Take an example v. So now what happened is here v will be the iterator variable, just like I here. We now have v. So what I need to do is simply console.log v. Let me comment this. Okay, sorry. For each, as you can see, the output is 1, 2, 3, 4. So we use camel case notations in JavaScript. So what is meant by camel case is nothing but the starting letter is small. Uh, if any other noun comes after that, we will use a capital letter. So that's why I need to use for each. For each, e will be capital. So this is how we use for each loop. Let's repeat it again. This is the array. For each element in array, it will be stored in v. I'm printing v. That's it. So just like we did it in using I iterator variable, but here we can use directly without specifying the size and increment. So this is for each loop. Now let's see map. So map is something that's almost identical to for each. So to use map, a dot map. So what map do is it will perform certain task on all elements in the array. If you want to perform some task on all elements on an array, we need to use map. Now, similar to this thing, uh, a dot map. So as you may notice, I forgot to mention, this is we are using an arrow function in this between this part. This is an arrow function, right? We in the olden days it will be something like this. So we need to get this function as an argument, and we'll be using this console.log uh, v. So this is how we used to do in this in the olden days. But now after the arrival of arrow functions, it is simplified as simply console.log v. That's it. So now let's see what will be the output. So as you can see, the output is 1, 2, 3, 4. And I just did something. So the output is 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is using a map. We can also do it like this as well. This is the typical function. In JavaScript, we are taking each value of this array A as a function argument, and this is the code of that function, right? So this is loops in JavaScript. So just a recap, for loop, for each loop, and map. There is also while loop, which is no change, just simply while. While is used when we know the termination condition. While n not equals to 0, simply print something. N minus minus, just like previous languages. There is no change for while loop. This is the new thing, map. So this is how we create loops in JavaScript.